When a professor at Columbia University decided to take a public jab at Barron Trump during a lecture, no one could have predicted the way he would respond. What happened next left the entire room in stunned silence. In the heart of Columbia University, the lecture hall was an iconic setting for what promised to be an engaging guest lecture. The students, a diverse mix of young minds eager to absorb knowledge, filled the rows of polished wooden desks, which gleamed under the soft chandelier lighting. The atmosphere buzzed with the energy of intellectual curiosity, a collective hum of anticipation, as caffeine-fueled minds prepared for a discourse on the evolution of leadership in America. It was a typical day, until it wasn't. Barron Trump, the son of President Donald Trump, sat quietly in the middle of the room, his face serene and unreadable. He didn't draw attention to himself. His presence was low-key, undoubtedly intentional. Even though his surname carried immense weight in certain circles, Barron had learned early on how to live under the radar. He had a calm and composed demeanor that made him almost invisible in a room full of students. His posture relaxed as he observed. Today's lecture was unique. A guest speaker, a renowned professor of political science with a reputation for sharp, cutting critiques of modern-day leadership, was set to speak. Some of the students adored this professor for his fearless approach, while others found the speaker's style to be abrasive, even divisive. No one, however, could have predicted how the lecture would unfold, especially not Barron Trump. As the clock struck noon, the door to the lecture hall opened, and the professor entered with an air of confidence, wearing a sleek charcoal suit that demanded attention. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. The class broke into polite applause as the professor strode to the podium, his eyes scanning the room with a knowing smile. The students seemed to hold their breath, eager to see what would come next. Would the lecture simply be another of the professor's well-crafted critiques, or was something more provocative in store? With a commanding voice, the professor began, introducing the topic of the day, the evolution of leadership in America. It was a subject that would surely engage the minds of those in the room, and it did. The professor dissected historical figures, examining their strengths and weaknesses with a sharp intellect and wit. He mocked past leaders, presidents in particular, with clever quips that brought a chorus of laughter from the students. Some were amused, others a little more hesitant, but no one could deny that the professor had their attention. For a time, the lecture went as expected, but soon something shifted in the air, subtle at first, but undeniable. The professor's focus began to narrow, and the topic transitioned from the broader scope of leadership in American history to something much more personal. The professor began to critique the Trump family, not just Donald Trump, but the next generation, the very family Barron belonged to. It started innocuously enough, just a harmless jab. And of course, the professor said with a wry smile, "We have the next generation of leaders, growing up in a golden tower, surrounded by yes-men, entitled before even earning a place in the world." The room shifted, and the chuckles rippled through the students. Barron remained unmoved. The professor paused, perhaps savoring the moment. He looked around the room, gauging reactions from the crowd. With the audience on his side, he took another shot. What could possibly go wrong? The professor's voice was dripping with sarcasm. Laughter erupted from some of the students, but Barron's face remained unreadable. The laughter was laced with discomfort from a few who had noticed Barron sitting silently in the crowd. Yet none of them expected what would happen next. As the professor continued to sharpen his criticisms, the atmosphere in the room began to grow thick with tension. Barron remained motionless, his hands resting quietly in his lap. The students shifted uneasily in their seats, uncertain whether to join in with the laughter or to remain respectful of the unspoken presence in the room. The professor, sensing a certain unease, decided to press on. Because, of course, everything about their upbringing has prepared them to take on the world, right? The professor said, voice dripping with disdain. What kind of lessons are they really learning in that gilded tower? A murmur ran through the room. Students exchanged quick, furtive glances. Some laughed uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. Others stiffened, clearly uneasy with the professor's direction. And still, Barron did not flinch. But then, an unexpected sound sliced through the atmosphere. The quiet scrape of a chair against the marble floor. Barron Trump had stood up. The student's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't moved for the entire lecture up until this point. But now, his towering 6'7" frame seemed to command the entire room. He wasn't in a hurry, taking his time as he pushed the chair back with slow deliberation, the noise carrying through the silence like a sudden jolt of electricity. Every eye in the room turned toward him, including the professor's. There was an expectant pause as Barron stepped away from his seat and began to walk toward the podium. The professor blinked, perhaps taken aback. Was Barron going to react with anger? Was this the moment the young man would finally speak out against the professor's words? Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting for Barron to respond in some way. And then, Barron stopped. He was standing just a few feet from the podium, but it felt like a chasm. The professor's confident smirk faltered slightly as he observed Barron's presence, but he didn't speak. Barron's voice broke the silence. It was calm, steady, powerful in its restraint. "I appreciate the analysis," Barron said, his words measured. "But let's talk about assumptions." A murmur ran through the room. The students looked at each other, unsure of what was coming next. Some had their phones out, recording the unexpected turn of events, while others just sat back, captivated by Barron's poised demeanor. The professor, who had spent the entire lecture tearing down political figures with ease, was now unsure of how to respond to Barron's quiet intensity. "People assume a lot about me," Barron continued, his gaze unwavering. "They assume I'm just my last name. They assume I've never faced challenges, that I don't understand struggle." He paused for a moment, letting his words hang in the air. "And here's the thing. Assumptions are easy," Barron continued, his voice strong but measured. "What's harder is listening, understanding, recognizing that no one, no matter their background, should be dismissed as a punchline." The weight of his words seemed to settle over the room. The students, who had moments ago been laughing or shifting uncomfortably, now sat in stunned silence. Barron's words had hit home. No one had expected this. Not the professor, not the students, not anyone. For a brief moment, the professor said nothing. He seemed to be at a loss for words. Barron had taken control of the narrative, and for the first time, the professor was caught off guard. Barron turned slightly, addressing the entire lecture hall now. His words were clear and deliberate, the power of his message evident in every syllable. "We talk a lot about leadership," he said, "but leadership isn't about tearing people down. It's about respect, even for those you don't understand." The room was utterly still. For a moment, there was no sound, no laughter, no movement, just the weight of Barron's message hanging in the air. The professor, for the first time that day, seemed speechless. The tension was palpable. And then, something changed. A single clap broke the silence, then another and another, until the entire class was on their feet, applauding. A standing ovation. It wasn't just a few polite claps. It was a genuine response to the unexpected turn of events, to Barron's quiet yet powerful intervention. The professor nodded hesitantly, perhaps out of respect, but also, perhaps, in recognition of his own miscalculation. There was nothing left for him to say. The moment was over, and Barron had made his point. By evening, videos of the encounter had gone viral. Social media exploded with reactions. The hashtag Barron Trump speech trended for hours. Barron Trump just schooled his professor on class and dignity. One tweet read, "Whether you like his family or not, this young man just taught us all something," another user wrote. News outlets picked up the story. Some defended the professor's right to critique, arguing that academic spaces should foster open debate. Others saw Barron's response as an awakening, an example of leadership that transcended personal attacks and assumptions. The professor, ever the professional, issued a brief statement. "Debate is meant to challenge us," he said. "Today, I was the one challenged. Respect to Barron Trump." But Barron remained unfazed by the frenzy. The next day, he returned to class like any other student. No grand speeches, no fanfare. Just a quiet return to the books. The applause, the viral videos, the debates. It didn't seem to matter to him. He had said what needed to be said, and that was enough. In the months that followed, discussions about leadership, assumptions, and respect continued. Parents and educators seized on the moment as a teachable lesson. Barron's words had become a symbol of resilience in the face of ridicule, and the world continued on, as it always did. But one thing was clear: respect is not about status or power. It's a choice Barron Trump had made in that moment without hesitation. Let this be a reminder: words hold power. Use them wisely. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life moments that challenge our perspectives. Let's continue the conversation.